Miranda, do you want to hit your few slides at the beginning here?
Yes. This first slide is just me telling you, hey, thanks for coming, welcome. And this one is just for those who don't know what we're doing at Illinois Green. We are a membership-driven nonprofit promoting sustainable buildings throughout Illinois to be healthier and sustainable structures. We do that through programming like today. We do that through policy advocacy, as well as promoting some initiatives throughout the state. So thank you all for coming, and I think the next slide is Chicago Sustainable Construction Leaders, which is our partner for today's event. So I'll let John or Patty.
So has anybody heard of the Chicago Sustainable Construction Leaders? All right. It's a group of sustainability leaders within construction companies. And the Chicago group is really based on a national network of sustainable construction leaders. So this is our local group, really to bring together peers in the industry, to share best practices, collaborate and advocacy, and really keep the forward momentum within our industry. So it's a great safe space to share what we're doing, what works, what isn't working, but really in a collaborative way. It's free. Anybody can join if you're leading a sustainability at a construction company. And so it's really kind of the focus. But it's everything to do with the built environment, with operations, construction sites, and all things related. Patty here is our local leader and is primarily responsible for bringing that group together. So thank you, Patty.
And then next, we just want to do a quick shout out to our sustainable sponsors who help let us do education programs like this throughout the year, and a special shout out to our gold level of ComEd, USG, C, and Sloan. You go to the next one. And then because of today's atmosphere, I'm actually going to let you all introduce yourselves if that's okay. If you want to start with John.
So John Bergman, I know many of you, but not all of you. Engineer by training, but I now work in the GC realm. I've only been with Power coming up on 2 years, so my construction perspective is slightly skewed because I'm still coming out of the consulting world. But prior to that, I spent many years in the commissioning world. So if you're not familiar with that term, it's really sort of understanding what a building is supposed to be doing and then trying to make it do what it is supposed to do. All the challenges involved with that.
Kim Magro with Williams Architects. I'm the director of our Chicago office and focused on mentoring our younger staff there and secretly forming a role for myself as director of sustainability.
There you go.
Not secretly, but it's not an official title.
Not a secret now. Sure. Elaine Fitzgerald. I'm senior specification writer at Lamar Johnson Collaborative. I saw a sponsor up there at Clayco. We happen to be independent subsidiary of Clayco. And I work through LJC and in a subset of the Technical Assurance Group to help standardize and pull together our office master, our specification office masters, so the teams have a starting point for it. So.
John Millade, I work with White & Company, which is a local design-led design-build firm. So we've got architecture, all stripes of engineers, interiors, construction, all under one roof, including a transportation team. My background is in sustainable building, so I've been playing with a lot of folks here in the same sandbox for a long time. A lot of my work has to do with zero energy, with health in buildings, and I do a lot around materials. So I think we've got, between myself and specifications, architecture, and engineering / construction / commissioning in the end there with John, we really have bring a rich perspective to how to understand it and shape specifications for the outcomes that we want. So, like I mentioned, when we were thinking about this, and it's like, how can we shape, some interesting content around specifications? We thought, well, what if we were to look at building enclosures in particular? And I've had some recent challenges with building enclosures for good reason. They're complicated. There's obviously a focus on materials and assemblies with building enclosures. They've grown more complex and they're less forgiving. Considerations are really endless. Here we're looking at moisture, condensation, heat, flow, airflow, water vapor, noise, fire, vibrations. goes on and on and on, you know, all the way through occupant comfort. And so you've got all these materials in assemblies, they're complex, all of these different considerations. They're field assembled from numerous materials with varying properties, so you've got different types of materials meeting up with each other, sometimes in new and novel ways. Products are made from different manufacturers, you know, and we've got built on site, one piece at a time with a lot of different tradespeople. Sometimes these tradespeople communicate well, sometimes they don't always communicate very well. Works performed in all weather conditions, and so we're dealing with that, particularly here in Chicago. We've all experienced supply chain issues, and so sequencing can be a challenge in some projects. And really, at the end of the day, regardless of how we specify or what our intention is with construction, we can't really verify how well we put the enclosure together until after the building is built, when we can do some testing. And we'll talk about that in testing along the way as well. So sometimes fixing these things can be quite costly. Did you know that pressurization testing has been part of our code for a long time? Who here has regularly done pressurization testing on projects? Unless they're pursuing passive house or some other aggressive standard or performance requirements, this has really been an unenforced code requirement, both for prescriptive and performance approach within the code. And it's been largely ignored by the code community. But this is the ASHRAE 2019 sister standard in IECC 2021. You can see here it's still 0.4. If we go to the newer codes, which all Illinois schools are currently subject to if contracted after January 1st of this year, and the state of Illinois will be subject to before too long, still requires it, and in fact increases the stringency down to 0.35 cubic feet per cubic feet per minute per square foot. And of course, this IEC 2024 sister to that ASHRAE 22, same requirement. And so this has been there. It's been around, and we really haven't been paying much attention to it unless you're pursuing one of these high-performing projects. And so, you know, for me, I think it's only LEED projects and passive house projects or zero energy projects that have really honed in on that, had envelope consultants and done pressurization testing. And with LEED version 4, which most of us are fairly familiar with, there was a really light touch of envelope in fundamental commissioning for all LEED projects. And that was just like review the drawings. If you were to pursue the enhanced commissioning option, then yes, there's a little bit more, but still didn't really, I'm pretty sure it didn't require formal pressurization testing. It was just following additional steps to, again, ensure the integrity of that installation. LEED v5. Did you guys know LEED v5 came out just recently? It's a hoot. You should check it out. And in LEED v5, this enhanced commissioning for building envelope is now just 1 point. But within it, you know, the fundamental commissioning, it does a lot of what LEED version 4 did. You know, it's still pretty light touch. They require now a dedicated envelope meeting. You have to continue to update the envelope commissioning plan throughout the design phase. There's a lot of other activities that associate with that. But the enhanced commissioning option now requires building air leakage testing, water penetration testing, infrared imaging. I mean, it goes on and on. So I mean, it's a recognition from USGBC and the folks developing the LEED standard that building enclosures are really important. You know, it's really important for energy, for comfort, for all those considerations that I had mentioned. The kicker, I think, with LEED version 5 is that all energy models make assumptions around infiltration through the enclosure. And there's kind of sort of industry standards on what you want to put in there. With LEED version 5, if you lower your infiltration rate in your energy model in order to improve your energy efficiency, it's going to get tested and they're going to match it back to your energy model. And so you could go from earning energy points to not meeting LEED at all. And it could be kind of scary. And so it's important that we learn more about building envelopes and how to build them well, if for nothing else, than to preserve the opportunity to pursue LEED for those projects that are inclined to do so. It seems easy. Like, it's just a building enclosure. There's instructions, you've got specifications. Why is it so hard? These are a couple images from a recent project from our envelope consultant, and of course these types of things had to get fixed, but things were installed like fairly poorly, right? And a lot of our folks that are in the field, on site, don't really understand the detailing of some of this. You know, if you're a construction manager, you've got a lot of different things that you're working on to meet your job description and, you know, fulfill your responsibilities, but you're not necessarily an envelope expert. And some of this should be pretty obvious for anybody attuned with the building industry, but a lot of these things are not so obvious. A recent consultant came through with infrared, you know, as I mentioned, is required in LEED v5. And, you know, you can find things using infrared imagery that can be pretty easy to fix, you know, some leaks like this. In this case, there was some detailing of the within the roofing that was off, and, you know, yeah, we can go ahead and fix that. You know, this is, again, with envelope commissioning, to have people come throughout the process of construction in order to identify these so they can be fixed. Sometimes it gets a bit more tricky. If you install certain assemblies, you may not be able to reach them anymore. And then you're kind of in a pickle. You know, you can put Band-Aids on it, but you sometimes can't fix the core issue. You know, in this case, if the vapor barrier is not adhered, you know, behind this assembly, I mean, you can't access it anymore, really, without taking a lot of pieces off. And so there's some rework that might need to be done. And sometimes, you know, you get air infiltration through the envelope in places that you might not even expect it. You know, and in this case, it's through, you know, the panels in the electrical room. And again, this has to do with proper air sealing, even within pipe penetrations. So once you run your wires, you've got to then air seal them.
All right, so I'll bring the specifier perspective to this, and I'll just kind of start laying the groundwork. As a specifier plays a role on the team, and I don't necessarily want to use the term gatekeeper, but I'll use it. Someone that has that responsibility and that ability, because of how they play the role on the team, to really look at the alignment of the sustainability initiatives and requirements in the project documents. So a lot of that technical intent, a lot of those requirements, it's our crew, our specifiers, who are really honing in on where it's said and how it's all coordinated. But what I initially had a list of like 9 gaps of like where the problem happens. But I'm gonna kind of approach it in a positive kind of spin manner on, you know, if they go off track, where are the opportunities that we can make the difference? So here's, you know, I'm gonna start with 4 kind of larger buckets of where the projects tend to go off track. A lot of it is our Division 1, our general conditions, our general requirements say something, they're very prescriptive, yay, we got it nailed, and then we go into those, what we'll call trade sections, your Divisions 2 and down to 49, and that coordination and that alignment's not happening. The second one, we tend to do a lot of performance specifying, and we are often too open-ended about it, or we're not doing it in the important places. We'll talk about that a little bit. A third bucket, we tend to kind of dilute that intent when we're going out for bid and we're looking at our submittals. We've put all this energy into it, and then we go, oh, it doesn't matter, or it gets lost in translation. We'll talk about that a little bit. And then last, you know, that VE word that gets value engineered out, we have all those great intents, you know, what are some of the things that are going wrong, where are those gaps, where it makes it easy for us to lose those requirements. And I'm gonna use this little guy here. So I'm gonna identify, you know, these opportunities, and this is where the risk is of not having the alignment, not having those requirements coordinated up in that, and we'll kind of relate them to the phases. In the bidding phase, Right, it's that clarity, it's picking and selecting the right products. Gosh forbid we put something in there that no one makes anymore or doesn't really hit the requirements. You know, we say we want this, but we'll put that product in there and they're not the right, they're not talking to each other the right way. Submittals, you know, enforcing that Division 1. We set up, and I think we'll see it a little later, too, we set up requirements for meeting agendas and who attends those meetings and all those sorts of things. How submittals come in, what needs to come in with those submittals. We need to be better policemen about those, and we'll talk about that. Substitutions, we know the game, right? Can we do it better, faster, cheaper? All these requirements are coming in, and it's keeping compliant. You know, we said we want this, and being, you know, strongholds in that area. Closeout too. You know, we'll talk about commissioning. Again, it's all great until it's not, and when we put it in and it leaks, or we don't get the paperwork through to you know, collect all of our EPDs and everything that needs to go back into the process. If we're not doing that, then it's kind of a moot point there too. So make Division 1 a binding contract, not a suggestion, right? One of the things I do in our office, we have a lot of presentations on the 8201, what's in your general conditions. We have guys that go, oh, I didn't realize 10 facilities were in the projects. It's like, oh my gosh. You know, it doesn't start at Division 2, it starts up there at Division 1. So I'm gonna, like 1 and 2 kind of go together here too. Like I explained, we can set requirements in Division 1. We should, let me collect my thought here, we should be talking about that compliance there. We hear often, well, the GC never reads that Division 1, I really want that stuff down in the trade sections. I think that's all valid, it is all valid, not think. So where I will always say it once and say it in the right place, I will also use a term mirror. You can coordinate that work, you can align it, you can say it in 2 places, and you just have to be smart about how you do it. Make it a gas moving. I'll show you an example. I mean, I'm not saying same content 2 different places, I'm saying instances. So we'll look at some of those. And then think about, no one's stuck with the language. Think about adding something as simple without sustainability data. Yeah, you know, we won't look at it if you don't give us the backup that says it hits the requirement that we want. So I'm not afraid to kind of put new language out there. So here's kind of what I'm talking about a little bit. On the left, you can kind of take a couple tactics. In part 1, under your submittals, you can say reference your Division 1. That's a simple thing. Yes, they have to have that Division 1 section with them, but at least it's an instance to, you know, hey, you know, it's kind of that beat you over the head as many times as you can. Hey, look, there's a section with all of this in there. So there's an instance where you've mirrored it, but you haven't duplicated the content. Or take a tactic and put your specifics in your sections. We do a lot of concrete pour work. A lot of Division 1 doesn't go with that. We're putting those requirements in the submittals in part 1. Will hear me talk about this a little bit more too. Treat your sustainability like a performance requirement along the lines of your air infiltration, of your water, you know, every other performing aspect of your building. Why is it building performance and sustainability? You know, this is how it's supposed to perform. It's part of your commissioning. So why not put a little category in your part 2, and you do this, and then you go talk about your loading on your railings, you know, whatever it is you put down in the performance. Here's a couple more examples too on the left. You know, go crazy, get it all in that Division 1 section. these are the targets we're gonna hit, here's your references, here's the programming you wanna follow. Then we've got all these related sections, make sure you're looking at those. So you can put those energy standards as requirements, package them all in there, and make them easy to read. That's the biggest thing I've been trying to do recently too. We hate reading those big manuals. Make it easy, you know, link them to them. Up in that Division 1 also, there's an opportunity to define things. We talk about global warming potential, the PCR, you know, a lot of that sounds foreign to a lot of people. So, you know, spell it out, remind them what they're doing. If you're going for embodied carbon and targeting things, write it in those Division 1 sections. Quality assurance, same sort of deal too. You know, I've got a sustainability coordinator. They're going to the pre-install meetings. They better be on the agendas. You know, keep mirroring the idea. You want these things hit. Here's, you know, kind of two examples, you know, during your bidding and construction phase of submittals. This one's a little more subtle. You've got a little green program building to check. Another one here, you know, spells out what we want, you know, what do you know, do you have this, do you not have this, send it back to us. So you've got bid forms in those Division 1s, like, you know, feel free to craft those, what you need. Flexibility, precision, choose strategically, right? Remind folks we can mix methods of specifying. We can go performance, we can go product specific, we can do that in the same job, in the same manual. Decide where it's important. You know, Rockwell in the back there, that's a lot of energy and a lot of real estate in that building. What about a performance spec there? You know, or a product specific spec there, so that you've got what you want and you're hitting your targets. So don't be afraid to mix those. And again, you know, kind of use those product specific specs in those high impact categories, your waterproofing, your thermal, concrete, wood, right? It's a team sport. It is, it's not, and that's why that gatekeeper word kind of is not the right one to use. Because it takes all of us, right? The specifier, architect, that design team who needs to communicate that, will hear that. General contractor too, reviewing those subs, enforcing that language, you know, and asking questions, and even that owner too, setting those priorities. And the middle aspect there, I see a lot of success when at these pre-installation meetings, they're teaching the subs and the project engineers what to look for in their submittals, what to look for. You know, it's a 20-minute toolbox talk kind of style thing, and it's, you know, sometimes it's done by the architect. It just says, hey, this is important, this is what an EPD looks like, this is how this has to get installed. And it's just a quick conversation at those meetings on part of the agenda that really raises awareness there. Owners too, we know it, early decision making saves money. Get that conversation out there, get it documented, get it communicated. We'll look at some examples. You know, these are the target setting opportunities. It could be as simple, and I'll kind of drive the point here too. This is a facility performance requirement. It's gotta be sustainable, so talk about it that way. Talk about efficiency, you know, and put that in there right with your acoustical design. I mean, level it. Level it in your language, level it in how you deliver there too. And then some of us are lucky to work for, you know, corporations that have a contracting arm to us too. What about the company? I mean, the company stands behind this sort of stuff. Now I can go and talk about construction ways, idling your trucks on the job site, all these sorts of things that have to deal with sustainability. Yeah, are they related to the project manual? Not totally, but I can get them talked about in our, you know, temp controls and site access and all that sort of thing, parking, all that sort of thing. And they don't align, you know, just a little mini case. You set a target, great, I want all these HPDs to happen. We put some real broad language in there, give us an equal, income's an equal, and you just kind of shot yourself in the foot. Write that language so that you get what you want, and use the mechanisms that we have in the manuals to do that. You know, there's simple tools. We see things like this. Our team does just a vetting of the products. I'll write a manual. Another folk on the team will go through them. They have an opportunity to see everything. Is it doing what we said it's gonna do? Is it complying to VOCs? Is it available in the United States? Whatever it is we're requiring of it, so. Just to wrap up, match, do your mirroring. Don't repeat your content, but get it in there. Use your performance specs, require those documents when you do that submittals, because at the end here, that's that checkpoint. It's not, that's where you can really hold your ground. And then collaborate early, have those target setting meetings and make sure everybody knows what we're talking about, so.
Can you tell me, I don't know what HPD means.
You just asked me too fast. Product declaration, what's the H? Is it health? Yeah.
Oh, it's the health with that, okay.
Yep.
Well, I'm just gonna hire Elaine now. As the architect.
Sure, let's go for it.
But the architect's role, in talking about the, content of this panel and trying to always keep focusing back on specs specifically, it's still our role to, big picture, bring the team together and understand early who the team is, help set those objectives, and then get the client understanding. Like, that's really our big job, is helping them understand how the things we're gonna start talking about specifying are gonna affect budget and schedule and all the way through the project, through the design process and the construction process. So, helping them pick the right certifications and things, but knowing what the impacts of those are, so. And then when we do start specifying, I'll get into that. Again, contract and budget, like helping the client understand that we're asking the construction team to do certain things. Is their contract covering that? And again, we love to partner with CMs because they're on the team early. We can constantly have that continual dialogue throughout the project, and get that feedback on the sustainable decisions we're making. Is it still a budget? Are we getting the bang for our buck? So, and then construction phase considerations, we'll talk about some of that. So like I said, the client understanding, it really is those schedule, budget impacts, identifying early, do they have certain grant and rebate programs that again are gonna affect how we specify things, if we're not gonna get those rebates, or grant program qualifications if we don't specify in a certain way. We always want an energy model so that we can have that data to help them understand and make informed decisions. And again, like I just mentioned, CM early on. And those schedule expectations, it's not just the prediction of that in setting a realistic schedule, but understanding the time in submittals dragging out when you're looking at infinite substitutions and the process of that, so. So again, I'm gonna just boil this down to one really important thing. For the architect, we need to understand that the detail we're drawing in the end is actually executable, both from a sequence standpoint and an available product standpoint. Is something having major lead time issues and we just can't get it anymore, or it's not gonna get here in time for the thing that we have it right before it, and then also, there are ways to detail something with a great new fancy product, but it's just complicating everything for the contractor in the field. So, as much as we can, we try to, there's some wonderful enclosure systems which have all the pieces you need. Let's try to use the most comprehensive system that has all the parts that work together, not picking off a shelf to specify different pieces from 20 different manufacturers. So that's just one example. And then, yes, in terms of accessing the information once we specify it, I think we are maybe a little redundant. We have things in the drawings as well as multiple spec sections, but this is why I'm gonna hire Elaine, so we can dig less redundant. But I mean, we know it's not, if certain trades are not looking at Division 1, certain are looking at Division 1 but not looking at a related trade. So we do try to be a little bit redundant, we may get ourselves in trouble there sometimes, but also, again, like, not just where that information lives in the spec, but putting in some of that language about substitutions, I did ask, because it came up in our conversations about whether we include a substitutions form, and this is where we need some uniformity. Some people said yes, some people don't. Some people refer to the CSI form, but don't actually put it in there. And those forms from CSI don't have particular language about sustainability requirements. So I think we need to make our own new form that says if you're substituting and this is a project with certain certifications, there's this additional language. So, and then again, that commissioning and third party, it's like, if we decide early on who's gonna be on site doing it's not just us. We try to train our teams, this is maybe on my next slide, but in what to look for on site, whoever is doing CA, but we also have, other people doing testing, other people doing visual inspection, and so knowing early on who all is gonna be responsible for that execution in the end. Yeah, so that's part of, yes, this construction phase thing. It's, again, being someone who's mentoring younger staff, we're trying to make sure everybody who's going on site, from the experienced project manager to whoever's young coming along with them, that we're pointing out, this is a pink phone we said should never be on this site. Now what do we do? And the typical details, repeating a little bit what John was saying about air sealing, things that you are just a quick, easy to spot red flags. And then again, making sure anyone who's working on CA is mindful of the schedule, making sure, helping their construction team, having made time at the right places in the schedule for the various testing and documentation reviews. And then, yeah, just, continuing to be part of that submittal process and keep it moving. I was gonna say that confirming the chain of communication between subs, it's definitely been an issue that we've had where we've had an early meeting, everybody at the meeting talked about it. That person who, was in charge of a certain aspect of the envelope didn't tell the sub who's working on that, or they never saw the, document we all looked at and thought about. So it's just making sure it's trickling down to the people on site who are actually doing the work.
All right, I'll take it from here. If you hear me repeat some of the wonderful things that have already been said, it's because it's absolutely true. And I hope to put the bookend on everything that's been said so far. So forgive me with that. And just to follow up that last point, communication with subs. Tuesday, I actually had to tell a metal panel installer to pull out his phone so I could give him the roofer's number so they could talk. So I get that far into it. But again, I'm going to try and spin it from the contractor's perspective, knowing that I've only been in the contracting world for less than 2 years. But a couple things that have been eye-opening for me that I wanted to kind of repeat out loud. I'm going to call some disclaimers, but oftentimes we're handed a spec book at the point of buying a project. We do have influence in making recommendations and changes. When we're brought early in a project, it's a little bit different, but in traditional design bid build, it's here's your manual, you owe this, right? So if it's not in the spec, we don't have much flexibility. I do want to point out that processes are definitely as equal to spec manual as products and performance for a building. So I think Elaine mentioned, we got this whole Division 1, don't start at 2 and move down. So I want to point out a couple of processes that are important to help everyone stay on track so things don't go off the rails. GCs, GRs, or general conditions, general requirements can make or break winning a project for us. The more you put into that, the less competitive you will be. So it's a game of paring that down, right? And what that really translates to is that's usually the most cost of that is how many people are on the job. We're running one person out of the back of the truck, or do we have a team of 5 people out there? And if it's one person out of the truck, which power doesn't really do, a lot of stuff's gonna get mixed. So the next point here, project engineers have a lot on their shoulders. It's interesting to watch what gets dumped on them. just saying that, I'll make it just clear. I mean, they do everything from ordering lunch to sweeping the rug to managing the submittal process, managing consultant logs. It's amazing to watch what they do, and I think Power often says they're the engine of the company. It's absolutely true. But what I bring here is that a lot of the administrative tasks generally fall to them. So the more that's in that spec, if it's not clearly thought through of how we're going to accomplish it, and we pare down our GCGRs, it's probably not going to happen. So that's another scope category. So to my next point, just be cognizant of what's specified, because if you're just dumping requirements in there without thinking through it, it's either going to get value engineered out or not done, right? And then lastly, building performance and product performance are different. I think that's been discussed here. So just understanding what those are and getting the right people to kind of decipher the differences between them. So I guess at a high level, I'm going to try from here to kind of break apart processes, products, and performance as it relates to specifications. Cool, so starting with processes, there is a sustainable design requirements, usually falls Division 1, 8.1 spec, sometimes generated by an architecture team, so Elaine, it sounds like your group generates that. Sometimes it's a third-party consultant that does that, and you'll get variances in how those are put together. But I wanted to give a couple of examples of successes with processes that we've seen in here, so I don't know how well you can read this, so I'll try and just paraphrase it here, but I got a couple areas highlighted in green here. But the progress meetings, they not only they indicate, let me back up. One thing I'm always a fan of in specs is defining who is the person that's a champion of that project. I always say if you can specify with impunity if it's just third party, because third party means somebody else is doing it, I'm just gonna put it in, right? But when you stand up and say, this individual, this role is gonna manage this process, it helps clarify things, and frankly, it helps us buy it appropriately. So here, for example, it says, right out of the gate, contractors required to attend these meetings coordinated by the LBC consultant, that's Living Learning Challenges, in parentheses, architects. So now we know architect is gonna coordinate these meetings. They then talk about how often they're gonna happen, who needs to be there. And then they do the same thing over again with subcontractors. So in reviewing this, I actually called the team and said, did they actually follow through on this commitment? And they said, yeah, they actually doubled this. Initially they actually did this more than they said they were gonna do just to make sure we were on track. So this was an LBC project that ended up a success, so it works, right? And on the flip side over here, during the execution part of the spec, I pointed out the kickoff meeting. Frankly, from my experience, and I'll be honest, I was guilty of this at certain points in my own career, it's very easy to do a kickoff meeting, tell everybody what they have to do, and then you disappear for the next 6 months until you have to back to site. That doesn't work. So we do see a lot of that. So a kickoff meeting is important. It kind of sets the standard and the framework. However, those follow-up processes are absolutely what's critical to keep things on track. So the takeaway here is, we want to bury our heads in the other specification sections, but if we can stick to these processes, is absolutely critical. So jumping to products real quick, the left side here is just it's an internal power flow chart of how a project engineer flows through submittal. I don't think there will be anything ground shaking about this. But there are, gaps and cracks here if you have someone who doesn't exactly know what they're looking for, or if you have people that are submitting on things and then installing other things, which brings me to the substitution point, which we've talked about a lot. And we see a lot of, to be honest, we see a lot of things that get installed that were just never submitted on. And I'm not saying that they just never submitted a submittal and they go install a product. I'm saying they submit a product and install something else entirely. I'll show you examples of that. But the substitutions to help the process, that form is absolutely critical. So another takeaway here is that if your organization can request or require a form, that helps move things quicker, because it gets rejected with, hey, you didn't give us this data, this data, this data. But if you have a form that says everything you need, and to the point of the sustainability section of the standard AIA form or CSI form, if there's missing stuff, then create a project-specific form to make sure it's clear from the get-go. I love this bottom point. Substitutions for convenience are not allowed. So there was language that Elaine had pointed out, I think it was Elaine, about sustainability, but don't just install something else or substitute, because it's hard to do or hard to do. I know there's product manufacturers out today, so you'll probably see that. But here are just two quick examples, right? So on the left picture here, it's technically a roof decking, and it turns up the wall. It's still a gypsum core product with a glass fiber face. However, it is different from what's horizontal. And the reason this is different is that you got two different trades. They both submitted the same product. This got installed. I walked past this probably 100 times and never picked it up. It was the building closure consultant said, what is this? At the end of the day, they performed similarly, the architect accepted it, but had this been a project that had specific requirements for regional sourcing, recycled content, LBC red list products, this could have been a nightmare. The amount of this we would have had to take off could have been disastrous for us. And same thing on the right side, we have 2 waterproofing membranes, same manufacturer, one's a sheet applied, one's a liquid applied. Willy-nilly they went and did it and said, oh, that rebar was there in the way. We couldn't get to it. It's like, well, did you submit on that? What is this? So it happens all the time. And it's really hard to keep up with. And it takes someone really, I hate to use the word policing, but policing the stuff in the field. And I have to give, Leopardo credit here. I've been on a few of their sites, and oftentimes you walk in, there's this huge sign that slaps in your face when you walk in that says, do not install any adhesive, sealant, paint, coating, whatever, without talking to Patty Lloyd first. It has to be formally submitted and approved and vetted. And I really wish we used something like that. But like this example here, this is all the same building. 2 pictures on the left, natural gas risers, 2 pictures on the right, condenser water risers. You can see at the floor ceiling, you got gray and red, red and gray. So I know immediately, without even knowing what these products are, something is changing floor to floor. This is a problem. You shouldn't be changing product floor to floor. So you have to dig into this, and then clearly they're going to have different product makeup, VOC content. They're going to have different performance characteristics. Is it fire rated? So there's a lot of questions. So I asked the question here: who owns the responsibility of we all do at some level, but it's really, really hard to keep up with. At the rate that you can pour a high-rise tower, this stuff's going in faster than you can blink your eyes. So it really takes a collective team to understand what the roles are in terms of ensuring the stuff's installed correctly in the field. All right, I'm going to jump over to performance now. I know John led this off with a lot of building air tightness testing, and I'm probably going to stick on this slide here for a second. And this is an example of the way I don't like things to go. So these are the no-nos and specifications. So we've got third-party, building air tightness test. And then the first sentence is test the building for air tightness. Who's the third party? And if you look down in the right-hand corner, this is Division 0727 spec. This is an air barrier spec. The architect even gets into, hey, you have to pay close attention to seals, caulking, windows, doors, louver frames. Well, all of that stuff is not an air barrier, right? So why is this an air barrier spec? So this often gets missed, and is the intention that we buy this test over air barrier? So it's just a very unclear spec. So I'm a huge fan of not putting these kind of whole building tests in any specific trade-specific task, because it will get missed. It won't be carried, and then ultimately, if that third party is supposed to be someone the owner hires, the owner's going to say, I never knew I had to do that, which was the case in this particular project. And likewise, on the right side of this, same exact spec, same exact project, we have a water intrusion test for storefronts, curtain walls, and slope glazing systems in an air barrier spec. So guess what's not happening on this project? These tests, because they were misspecified. So where should these go? I, again, am a big fan of building enclosure commissioning. I used to perform it at prior points in my career. However, I understand that not every project has that as a scope, right? So when I'm kind of juggling here between 2 different specs. So the 0191 is a building enclosure commissioning spec. The 0183 is just a general building enclosure performance spec. So one of which is generated by and led by a building enclosure commissioning professional. The other of which is typically the full team, whether that be consultants, architects, owners, just clarifying how that enclosure is supposed to perform. So I'm going to show you a couple examples here of how, I guess, 2 different ways to do a building enclosure commissioning spec if you have that as a service under project. So one, they clarify some of the roles and responsibilities. So the first one is the BECXP, or building enclosure commissioning professional, shall observe the owner contractor testing. So right out of the gate, we know the owner is going to buy all this stuff. They're supposed to, right? Construction manager arranges for it, yada, 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 go on. Get further down the spec, they give you the pass criteria, that's good. The number of projects that had unclear passing criteria is astounding. Quick sidebar, this actually was a Northwestern job. About a month ago, I was literally getting screamed at by a glazer about unclear passing criteria right in front of our intern on her first day, and her eyes were just like plastered, she was freaking out. And we had to basically settle it right there because the testing unit had already set up. And I was like, look, I can tell you now what's in the spec is not very clear. If you're asking me, this is what needs to be in it. And I'm gonna call the shot here, we're gonna test this, because I'm not gonna have to have him come back because this wasn't clear. Anyway, I got an email from that intern at the end of the week that said, that was my favorite part of my first week. Thank you for taking that. I'm glad you like this, because this is my new favorite. But anyway, passing criteria, absolutely critical. But what's not clear in this spec is, right, they say static water test, static air test, but they aren't telling you what you're testing that on, right? They're just saying, hey, this is a static water test. Are we testing a glazing system? Are we testing an air barrier system? So they do schedule test, but again, they don't tell you where you're doing these tests. So to me, this is kind of like getting better, but it's not quite where it's supposed to be, which is where I really love the Division 018316 performance enclosure. So this building enclosure commissioning provider separated those two. They said, hey, for all, if you look at the related sections, Division 1 exterior enclosure performance requirements, in the performance testing they said, go look at that division to clarify what, sorry, I'm trying to give us some light here. Go look at that spec for all the requirements related to the building enclosure. So once you get there, it's a lot. I mean, this thing was like 20 some odd pages on this. So like it's small here, and it's intended to be, because as John started this with, enclosures are extremely complicated, right? So I'll just point out a couple things in this that are useful, but they talk about all the connections that need to be made, what has to happen in the submittals, the general test, like the whole building test that John was referencing earlier, your whole building air tightness, your thermography. And then once you get down into the field test, down to the individual layer, they tell you the location. This is gonna be done on a curtain wall. What test standard? The ALMA 503. Description of it, here's your pass-fail criteria. Here's when it's scheduled and where it's happening on the building. And they jump down. Now we're talking about a punched masonry opening window. So they literally broke down every single opening type. This is extremely complicated. I wouldn't expect and I mean this respectfully, like a typical architect to be able to fully flesh this out. This usually requires like a sophisticated consultant or a sophisticated person within an architecture firm. But that said, this makes it absolutely clear about how to buy it, how to execute it, when it happens, where it happens, and you're not screaming at someone in front of your intern about what's considered successful and what's not. And if I could give a quick shameless plug, is anyone going to CSI National this year in October in Cincinnati? You are? All right. I'm presenting on this specification alone, just because I get so jazzed up about this because I'm tired of getting screamed at. So there's a lot of effective use of this if you take the time to put it together. So I hope I bookended John's initial comments early.
So we've got a few questions for each other up here, and we'd love to have questions from those here as well. I guess there's talk about, like, within the specifications, we can put these requirements up front in Division 1. We can have instances of them throughout the specification in various sections. If you put them in Division 1, like, how do you ensure that every tradesperson is going to get Division 1 or pay attention? And this goes for waste management, it goes for indoor air quality during construction, it goes for the sustainability or enclosure. Like, it's a lot for a tradesperson who's running job to job to have to digest potentially different specs on each job, multiple Division 1 sections. Like, what are the solution sets there? What ideas do we have to help overcome that?
Right, we joked when we were talking, they just have to read them. But, I'm curious what you see.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean,